It's the Bleav in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel, where right now the Texans are plus 950 to win the AFC, just ahead of the Broncos and just behind the Patriots. You can check that out on FanDuel. Three things I want to cover and get into today, as today is Thursday as I'm recording this. The schedule releases tonight, so I'll do a podcast tomorrow for Bleav in Texans as well, reacting to that. But there are a few nuggets from things we already know from the X account, Nerding on NFL, who is very, very good at delivering some of these nuggets. Some things about the schedule that I already don't like. I'll get to that at the end of the show. But first, I want to talk about the things that we can look forward to after the schedule release. A lot of you are going to be listening to this or watching this after the schedule's already out, and you're going to be left thinking, all right, well, now what? There's some things I'm really excited about watching, seeing how things progress with the Texans. Then I want to take some answers from, give some answers to questions you guys have asked or respond to some of the comments you guys have made. And then we'll get into the schedule stuff at the end on the things that we already know. But after the schedule comes out, there's a little bit of a dopamine withdrawal. You digest it, you get excited about some things, you make your travel plans, all of that. And then we're on until July. Nothing really happens on the football field other than OTAs, which people love to downplay, act like, oh, it's no big deal if your quarterback's not taking reps in OTAs. Why are you guys so worried about CJ Stroud having a sore shoulder and not being able to throw? And then you go out and you have a disappointing offensive season last year. That's why I get concerned during OTAs. But the positive things, and the thing that by far I'm most excited about, is the imminent return of Tank Dell. And does it happen in OTAs? We've seen him. He's been around the team. We've watched workout videos of him. We know that he's looking good. We know that many people will point out that, hey, he's skinny. Yeah, he's always been skinny. He's a little guy. I just want to see what it looks like when he's out there in team drills. And I don't know for sure that we're going to see that in OTAs or minicamp, but there's a real good chance that we see him out there working against the defense and actually receiving balls thrown by CJ Stroud. I'm really excited about that, both on, from a Texans fan perspective, just because, add to the mix, have more viable weapons, and just make it that much more potentially potent of an offense. But on the personal side of things, I'll be really happy for Tank Dell, because every step along the way, we've heard nothing but positive things about the way he's attacking this rehab. And when you tear multiple ligaments and or tendons in any kind of an injury, it's hard. Modern medicine is incredible, and guys come back from these things, but it's never a slam dunk guarantee that a guy is A, going to come back, and B, that he's going to look like he did before. So the biggest thing he has going for him at this point is just his youth. Guys like Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb had a catastrophic knee injury early in his career, but came back and had a great career until he had the most recent catastrophic injury, and he hasn't come back from that nearly as well. Age has a lot to do with that. So Tank Dell's got youth on his side. But that is the biggest thing I'm looking at. The second one, and I'm looking at this with a certain amount of trepidation. It's what's CJ Stroud's answer when he receives the inevitable question about his contract status and whether he wants an extension or anything like that. I think that the most likely scenario is that he gives some kind of a milquetoast answer that's just the standard, hey, I let my agent handle that stuff, I'm just focused on right now, which is cool. That's completely 100% the appropriate answer to give. The two different directions you could go with that in terms of either volatility or controversy or anything is if theoretically he could do something like Kyler Murray did a couple years ago, where all of a sudden you start throwing out all kinds of tidbits about how you're unhappy, or does he unfollow the team on Instagram or something. I do not expect that to happen. I would be really, really surprised if CJ Stroud did anything like that. For one, he's participating in the offseason program. Usually the first salvo in trying to express your discontent is staying away from the offseason program. CJ's been the opposite on that. He's been calling the free agency pickups. He's been calling and visiting with the draft picks. Like, he's doing everything by the book the way a quarterback who's committed to his team should be doing. So I don't think we're going to hear that. I think there is a chance potentially that he says something that gives us a little bit more clarity. you know what? I'm genuinely not going to worry about that, or I don't want to have any discussions with the Texans about that until after this season. If he said something like that, I mean, it would slam the door shut on the first takes of the world and the people that just, especially in June and July, want to have huge opinions about that stuff. I know I'm guilty of talking about it a lot. But I think, given DJ Bieniemy's report that there haven't been any discussions, I think it's likely, or it's a very good possibility, that there won't be any more discussions. And it's only a story if there's a complete absence of information. If he wants to nip it in the bud completely and do so, that'd be cool. I don't expect that of him or think that that's what he should be doing. It's just that there's a possibility. So I'm not looking forward to it the way I'm looking forward to Tank Dell being out there on the field, but it's something that I'm waiting to hear. I'll be intrigued and interested in hearing what his response is. And then when it comes to the rookie minicamp, which we already had, OTAs, minicamp, it's hard for rookies to really take a huge leap forward during OTAs and minicamp just because you're not wearing pads. The biggest jump we saw from a rookie that I can remember recently was Kamari Lassiter in his rookie year, because they had him out there working with the ones almost immediately. And everything that D'Amico said about Kamari Lassiter was a little bit different from the way he talks about other rookies. He talked about Kamari Lassiter like he was already a veteran player in terms of maturity, in terms of performance, all of those things. And they were very comfortable putting him in there. You got to remember, that was at a point where, man, that cornerback position opposite of Derek Stingley was wide open. It was CJ Henderson and another couple guys that he might be competing with, but there was no slam dunk guaranteed write it and pen starter on the roster. For the rookies this year, it's way more competitive. And if you look at the guys that they drafted early, you've already got an entrenched starter there. Now I say entrenched. You draft Rutledge, who's a guard / center. And guard looks like you're pretty good to go with Wyatt Teller and Ed Ingram. I'd be really surprised if Wyatt Teller isn't the starting left guard. And at least in their depth charts, they mix up the ones and everything. And rookies will run with the ones and the twos and the threes. But I think that for now, there's not a lot Rutledge could do to show that he's a better offensive guard than Wyatt Teller, who's got a long track record and a whole lot of film on him until you get the pads on. The chance for him to be taking a bunch of snaps at center and then looking like he's handling it well. Are the shotgun snaps all great? Is he not making mental errors? And then B, how does D'Amico Ryans talk about him? I think if Rutledge comes in and handles the mental and physical part of playing center, and by physical part with no pads on, I mean, is he snapping the ball consistently well? Does it look like he's not having an issue with the mental side of it as he's making calls pre-snap and all of that? And then does D'Amico say, hey, yeah, look, we really feel good about him. He's way ahead of where we thought he'd be. Do we start to feel like, okay, Rutledge might be the guy? The other guy that I don't think can win a starting position, but maybe we see him used a fair amount, run with the ones, is Marlin Klein, the tight end. He's, as any draft publication or reaction or grade you look at, he was a reach by the Texans, or a perceived reach by the Texans. They like him for his potential as a blocker, but I think D'Amico a couple times has really tried to sell the receiving side of it too. D'Amico doesn't try to sell anything, but he's talked about how they think he has upside as a receiver. So if he's running with the ones, there's only so much he can show as a blocker during minicamp. But if they really like what he's doing and how he's picking up running routes in the NFL and everything, maybe we start to see something with him. Those are the two guys I think that might have a chance to take a step forward in our eyes during minicamp, but I'm not going to hold my breath over it. If you move on to post minicamp, between now and training camp, or between minicamp and training camp, when we really enter the dead period, the biggest thing that I keep my head on a swivel for with Nick Caserio is what kind of veteran free agent pickups do you make? And the two areas that we've talked about a lot, and I hear from Texans fans about, is A, depth at running back, and B, depth at defensive end. And there are guys out there. I don't think it's going to be Najee Harris. I think Najee Harris is probably waiting to see if he's got a spot he can go to, which is either a good team or a place where he can be the bona fide starter. And his price tag might be too high for what the Texans are looking at as a guy to bring in to have a third potential starting caliber running back there, or a guy that's in reserve. Knicks tended to treat that position, other than if it's Joe Mixon or David Montgomery, and those guys they didn't have to pay a premium price for. He's tended to treat running back as almost a commodity that you can go out and find somebody somewhere. The last couple of years we had Cam Akers right before training camp, and then last year we had Nick Chubb right before training camp. And those are both guys who are coming off of injuries and veteran players that you didn't expect them to be starters necessarily. Obviously what happened with Nick Chubb last year happened, and Nick Chubb ends up being the starter. I would like to have somebody with a little bit more juice to him, that if David Montgomery gets injured, it's not trying to fit Woody Marks into that role again, when I want to see Woody Marks as a receiver. So who is that guy? Is it somebody they trade for? Is it somebody they pick up off of waivers? I think there will be another running back on the roster at some point. We just don't know when, where, and how they're going to pick him up. It'll be sometime between now and week 1. We're probably going to see another running back in the room. At defensive end, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, there's a few other guys out there that I think are in that same boat of maybe they're waiting to see if there's either a starting opportunity. Maybe they wait until training camp to see if somebody gets injured. Joey Bosa is the biggest name, and he's been relatively healthy the last couple of years. He went through those couple of years where he was really banged up. I would imagine that's a guy that wants at least one more crack at being a starter somewhere. If he comes here, he's out of a whole lot of fun, and he's going to get a bunch of snaps as a pass rusher, but the big dogs are going to be Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson always. Those guys are going to be the ones that are out there on 3rd and long, even as you're rotating people in. So we'll see about that. I think that's just like running back. That's something that probably happens between now and week 1, and we can't predict exactly how it's going to go. If we get into training camp, by far the biggest thing I'm excited about is that for the first time in a few years now, we have the potential to watch actual battles between the offensive line and the defensive line. I cannot tell you how difficult it was last year, because to watch the Texans offense practice, I would have to get on the radio or get on a podcast and talk about how, man, the offense just isn't doing anything. The O-line's getting destroyed. CJ can't get a pass off because there's people in his lap. And yes, you're not allowed to hit the quarterback. It doesn't matter when you've got 2 defensive tackles in his face running past him, and CJ's trying to get the ball off, within rhythm, and you try to simulate as much like an actual game as it is. So good quarterbacks, and CJ is a conscientious quarterback. When you're practicing and they're not allowed to touch the quarterback, you still want to be sure you're not the guy that's just holding onto the ball with no regard for the pass rush whatsoever and acting like you're going to have 5 seconds to throw the football every time. So CJ will be out there, and he's trying to operate the way a normal quarterback would. And all right, if there's seepage off the right side of the line, I'm going to scramble to the left. And that's what it was time and time again. In the run plays, it was just over and over and over again. Nothing happening on the offense because the offensive line was getting destroyed so thoroughly. I think it's still going to be lopsided, or at least still in favor of the defensive line, because it's going to be one of the best defensive lines in the entire sport of football. But there's going to be more back and forth this year. I trust that. And that's including understanding that rookie offensive lineman versus that veteran Texans defensive line. That's going to be a challenge for them. But just by having Wyatt Teller and Ed Ingram on either side of whoever's playing center, by having Ariante Ursary 1 year into the league, having either Trent Brown or Braden Smith at any given time at right tackle, where last year during camp, Titus Howard was still bouncing back and forth and in and out. And it was a discombobulated mess. I'm really, really excited about that. And if the Texans offensive line can show themselves to be competent, I think the Super Bowl odds for the Texans, which currently sit at plus 2,000, basically 20-1 to win the Super Bowl, do they have a chance to pull that off? I would like those odds if this offensive line ends up looking really, really good. And CJ can not only be protected, but also have the support of a good rushing attack. You can find that on FanDuel. Texans at plus 2,000 to win the Super Bowl. Few questions and comments that I grabbed off of the Bleav in Texans YouTube YouTube and then also my own personal YouTube. I do a bad job of soliciting questions. I'm going to start doing Q&A more often now. So please, in the comments, if you've got questions you want answered that I haven't addressed, feel free. And I always enjoy your guys' comments because you make some really good points. But just a few of these. Sheriff Z says, hey, Seth, you were talking about Jaylin Noel's struggles that may have kept him off the field. Some run blocking reps from him were a little rough, and I think that might have contributed as well. I'm glad you brought this up. Yes, I 100% agree with you there. I think that's at least one of the things, aside from adapting to life as a slot receiver in the NFL, is way more of a mental challenge than a lot of other positions. Remember, Cecil Shorts a couple times told me that playing slot receiver is the closest mentally to being a quarterback on the football field. Like you have to be reading coverages, pre-snap alignments, all of those things at the same level mentally as the quarterback does. And you need to be that guy who's just in tune with the quarterback. And you remember with CJ Stroud and Stephon Diggs a couple of years ago, I know the numbers weren't gaudy, but there were so many times before Stephon Diggs got injured where the pass protection had broken down and CJ was able to get the ball off to Stephon Diggs into a really tight window and move the sticks, get a first down, a little bit of a run after a catch, whatever it might be. That's the kind of thing you get with a veteran receiver like Stephon Diggs. You can never expect the second-year guy to be on that same level, but all of that comes with just that almost ESP level communication that a receiver and a quarterback have. The run blocking side of things, I know. We'll go back to the Kevin Walter days where people got tired of hearing what a good blocker Kevin Walter was, but it was true. That was a big, big part of why he was so good and valuable to the team, especially in Gary Kubiak's scheme. Jaylin Noel, you look at him and you think, well, come on, look, he's a small guy. How much of a run blocker do you expect him to be? He's strong as hell. You have to remember, he's strong as hell, and it's not just weight room strength. It starts in the weight room because he's a workout maniac, and he's got really impressive numbers. I think he benched Didn't he have like 25 reps on the bench or something, which for a receiver is really impressive, a smaller receiver. And you see it in some of the tackles that he breaks. I think the potential for him as a blocker is very much there. And we saw some evidence of it last year. There were some nice plays he had as a blocker. He just needs to be more consistent with it. And some of that, going back to the mental side of it, so much of it is about anticipating where the guy's going to be, how to use the angles to your advantage. I think he's got the potential to make a lot of strides in that between year one and year two. And hopefully Jaylin Noel just becomes more of a staple of this offense. Tank Dell, I always have to remind people of this, he's not really a slot receiver. He looks like because he's tiny, you're thinking is to make him a slot receiver. He'll play in the slot, but he's also really good on the outside. So Jaylin Noel is more the guy you look at as if you want a classic slot receiver. That's the guy that you're hoping he grows into that role. Next one, I remember I was talking about knuckleheads at some point, about how I thought there was room for a knucklehead or two on this team because the culture is so good that you can absorb a couple of knuckleheads and it doesn't become cancerous. Paul is really bored, says, define knucklehead. I would argue we have a few. They just also happen to be swarm. So if you say they already happen to be swarm, I'm thinking on the defensive side of the ball. I guess with knucklehead, it could mean it's kind of the old say. What was the old quote from? Was it Dickens that said, no, it's some Russian author who said every happy family is exactly the same, but every miserable family is different in its own way. And I would say the same thing about knucklehead. Sometimes knuckleheaddom comes from being a guy who's always late to meetings, just can't get right. Sometimes knuckleheaddom comes from your actions off the field, either with substances, ladies, motor vehicles, whatever it might be. Sometimes being a knucklehead is a guy that just does his own thing and goes off script a little bit. And those can be all to varying degrees destructive to a football team or like, okay, well, whatever. You know, Lawrence Taylor's a classic example of kind of a knucklehead in a lot of regards, but every football coach in the history of football would be cool with whatever level of knuckleheadness he has because he's such a magnificent football player. I think the Texans, by and large, defensively, they don't have anybody that goes off the rails in terms of playing the scheme. I think there are times where they're overly aggressive in the defensive backfield, but it's not an extreme level like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Sometimes he's just going to go do his own thing we've learned and seen and it was known already. I think that was a little bit of an experiment of, all right, let's bring in a guy that might not fit the mold, but man, the upside and his potential is so good. His potential to make big plays is so good. Let's see if we can make it work out. And it turned out that it wasn't going to work out. And he ended up going and do some good things for Chicago at the end of the year. I Bleav it was Chicago. So sometimes it's just the right environment. Right now, they don't. I'm not saying they got to go out and get a knucklehead. I'm just saying that the culture is really strong, and if it's the right knuckle, sometimes you don't know until, as Nick would say, you get him into the building, and then you can see whether this knucklehead can grow and thrive in our environment, or you got to send him packing immediately. That was a famously Bill Belichick thing to do up in New England. They would bring a guy in like Hainsworth or somebody, and if it wasn't working out, they would cut ties immediately. You just always got to be ready to cut ties with the knucklehead after you run the experiment. That's what they did last year with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Last one from Sage Dragoon. Oh, Sage Dragoon. If C.J. has another poor performance in the playoffs again, then it's time to trade him in his fifth-year option, or either pick up Allen, Burrows, or Jackson the following year. You had me until Allen, Burrows, or Jackson. Let's talk about those three guys specifically. Josh Allen, I know that every now and then there will be a little bit of controversy over whether Josh Allen is happy up there or not. I guess it's technically a possibility. We'll see how it plays out this year. Now that they've got they've got his guy from his side of the ball in charge. Burrows is definitely possible, but I wonder if the Texans would. Unless the Texans have, like in this hypothetical, CJ has another poor performance in the playoffs, that would mean that the Texans don't have a really great draft position. And how much are you willing to give up for Joe Burrow? You've got me saying Burrows now because you wrote Burrows. Damn it, Sage Dragoon. Or Lamar Jackson. Like Joe Burrow's the one that's viably discontented enough to force his way off of the Bengals. I think it's more realistic, honestly, that Matt Stafford is a free agent after this season. They just drafted Ty Simpson in the first round. Baker Mayfield's a free agent this next offseason, and I don't know exactly what'll happen with him there. I think those guys might be more realistic, but as I said at least once before, I don't like having this conversation. Listen, I'm not some journalist that's trying to be objective all the time. All right, I'm just a sports talk dude who used to play for the Texans and is a Texans fan, and it feels dirty and weaselly to have this conversation. I'm not saying I'm ignoring the possibility of it. I just don't like thinking about it right now. And speaking of CJ Stroud, right now he's plus 5,500 to be the NFL MVP, 55-1 odds on CJ Stroud. One of the big question marks about CJ Stroud has been, all right, CJ Stroud in either inclement weather or cold weather in the playoffs, as we just heard from the question there. The NFL schedule makers, for what we know right now on Thursday afternoon, and I'll do another podcast as a reaction to this tomorrow or late tonight. We know that the Texans are playing in London. Okay, we've known that for a few days. But then according to Nerding on NFL on X, who tends to be 99% accurate on these schedule leaks, has the Texans playing on Sunday night in Pittsburgh in December 6th, then has them going to Washington the next week on December 13th for a noon game. And then 2 weeks after the Washington game, in Philadelphia on Christmas Eve against the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist. I don't like thinking about how the NFL has screwed my team or anything, but I don't care whether you have questions about your quarterback or not. When you're an enclosed stadium team from the South going up to play 3 games up north in December, it's turning me into a flat earther. I'll sign on to your conspiracy. JFK shooting, whatever, cool. I'm game for your conspiracy theories. They got hosed on that. And that's before I find out what other potential mismatches or travel issues the Texans might have. This is put up or shut up time when it comes to, can the Texans be a tough and gritty team that's built to play up north in the cold in the playoffs? Can you get home field advantage? All of those things. That's 3 potentially cold weather games in December against tough opponents too. It's not like they're catching a break. Well, okay, I say tough opponents. We'll see what the Steelers and we'll see what the Commanders are, but playing Philadelphia on Christmas Eve in front of a raucous fan base as the Eagles always are. All right, I got to reframe things. I want to complain about getting hosed by the NFL schedule makers, but if what you want is a football team that's got a lot of experience playing in cold weather and a quarterback that's hopefully put some really good film out there of him playing either in rainy, wet, cold conditions or something by then maybe you're that much better prepared for if the Texans are on the road in the playoffs. Getting home field advantage and not having to worry about it is by far the preferred method of dealing with this type of stuff. But this is also, man, this is the Texans where if they don't get off to a slow start like they did last year, if they're performing really well, that you're put in a position where, man, you got to run the gauntlet, and we'll see which games are either ahead of or behind the Eagles. But remember back to the Christmas Day fiasco against the Ravens a few years ago. I mean, that was where you were facing the Steelers, the Chiefs. All those teams were just funneled into those primetime games in a 12-day window, and the Texans did not fare all that well. Injuries had mounted by that point. So we'll see, but that's what I'm most disgruntled about. I'll get excited about some things before we do our next podcast. Thanks everybody for watching. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, please leave a 5-star review. Makes a big difference in how other Texans fans can discover this channel and this podcast. Thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring the Bleav in Texans podcast.